First contact and desperate plea. The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning at the Deep Space Communications Array in New Zealand. At first, the technicians thought it was an equipment malfunction. The signal patterns were unlike anything they'd ever seen before. But as the quantum computers began decoding the transmission, excitement turned to shock, then to grim determination. Admiral Thomas Harrison stood before the United Earth Defense Council, his distinguished career of 40 years, having never prepared him for this moment. The holographic display behind him showed the desperate message from across the stars. A civilization was dying, and they were calling Earth for help. The Nixians are an aquatic species, Harrison explained, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Their entire civilization exists within the vast oceans of their homeworld, Nixus Prime. The Kryvax Empire, a significantly more advanced civilization, is systematically draining their oceans for resource extraction. Counselor Valentina Petrova leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And the Galactic Council? Surely there must be some form of interstellar governance. There is, Harrison replied, his jaw tightening. But according to the Nixians, the Council operates on a strict non-intervention policy regarding resource disputes. They've basically given the Kryvax Empire a permit to commit genocide. The chamber erupted in murmurs of disgust. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 5 years ago, and their first major contact with galactic civilization was witnessing its moral bankruptcy. Commander Raj Patel, head of Earth's fledgling Space Combat Division, pulled up tactical displays. The Kryvax ships are massive, each one nearly the size of Manhattan. They're using some kind of quantum siphon technology to extract and store the oceans. At their current rate, Nixus Prime will be uninhabitable within 3 months. What are their defensive capabilities? Asked General Maria Santos, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays. Minimal, Patel responded. The Nixians never developed significant military technology. They've spent millennia advancing their biological sciences, environmental harmonization, and deep-sea architecture. They never imagined anyone would try to steal their oceans. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's fleet was new, untested. Their ships still relied on relatively primitive fusion drives and magnetic shielding. Going up against the Kryvax Empire would be like bringing knives to a gunfight. We should focus on diplomatic channels, suggested Counselor John Way. Perhaps we could negotiate with the Kryvax. With all due respect, Harrison interrupted, his voice sharp. We've analyzed the Nixian data about the Kryvax. They're not interested in diplomacy. They see less advanced species as resources to be exploited. Sound familiar? The room grew quiet again. Every human knew their history. Centuries of colonialism, exploitation, and genocide. They'd learned those lessons the hard way, written them in blood and tears before finally uniting as one people. If we help them, Petrova said carefully, we'll be making powerful enemies. The Kryvax Empire spans hundreds of systems. The Galactic Council would likely sanction us. We'd be risking everything we've built. Harrison straightened his uniform and looked each council member in the eye. 200 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves fighting over resources, borders, and ideology. We swore we'd never let greed and indifference guide us again. Now we face our first test as a spacefaring civilization. Will we stand by and watch another species die because helping them is inconvenient? Or will we show the galaxy that humanity remembers its conscience? The council chamber erupted in heated debate. Arguments about military readiness, economic impact, and diplomatic consequences flew back and forth. But as the discussion raged, Harrison noticed something. In all the arguing about how they should respond, not one council member had suggested doing nothing. Finally, Council President Isabella Marquez raised her hand for silence. We've heard the arguments. Now we vote. The question before us is not whether to help the Nixians, but how. Our ancestors dreamed of reaching the stars. They imagined a future where humanity would be a force for good in the galaxy. That future is now our responsibility. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, Earth's shipyards began humming with activity. The EDF Thunderchild, humanity's first true battleship, was joined by dozens of smaller vessels being rapidly retrofitted for combat. In labs across the planet, scientists and engineers worked frantically to adapt Earth's technology for space warfare. As Harrison watched the preparations from orbit, he received a transmission from the Council. Permission to send a response to the Nixians. He drafted it himself. To the people of Nixus Prime, humanity stands with you. Help is coming. Hold on. The message would take 2 weeks to reach them. Harrison hoped they had that long. Humanity's first interstellar war was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn that the youngest spacefaring race still remembered what the others had forgotten. Sometimes you had to fight for what was right, no matter the odds. Operation Stormbreaker. Captain Danielle Wright stood at the helm of the EDF Thunderchild, watching Earth's first combat fleet take shape in high orbit. 37 ships, humanity's entire interstellar-capable force, assembled in a formation that would have been impressive just a few years ago. Now, measured against the vast power of the Kryvax Empire, it seemed almost painfully small. Final systems check complete, Captain, reported Lieutenant Marcus Okonjo from the tactical station. All weapons platforms responding normally. Wright nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic displays surrounding her command chair. The Thunderchild had been transformed over the last 2 weeks. What was once an exploration vessel now bristled with hastily installed weapon systems and experimental shield generators. Status of the quantum fold drive, she asked, turning to her chief engineer. Commander Jessica Torres wiped grease from her hands as she emerged from an access tunnel. It's stable, but I won't lie to you, Captain. These modifications we've made, they're untested. The amount of power we're pushing through these systems, it's way beyond their original specs. Just like everything else on this mission, Wright replied with a grim smile. How's the new stealth system integration coming along? The metamaterial coding is holding, Torres answered. Dr. Patel's team says it should bend most scanning frequencies around us. But again, we've never tested it against Kryvax technology. The intercom crackled. Captain Wright to the Admiral's briefing room. In the station's tactical center, Admiral Harrison had gathered the fleet's senior officers. The room's central holodeble displayed their target, Nixus Prime, a blue jewel of a world 47 light-years from Earth. The latest intel from our quantum probes isn't good, Harrison began without preamble. The Kryvax have accelerated their harvesting operations. They've already drained 17% of Nixus Prime's oceans. The Nixians are being forced into ever-shrinking habitable zones. What about their defenses? Asked Captain Rodriguez of the EDF Artemis. 23 harvester ships, each carrying a complement of fighter craft. Their orbital positions are here, here, and here. Harrison highlighted points around the planet. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours in most areas. Conventional engagement would be suicide. Then why are we smiling, sir? Wright asked, noting the slight upturn of Harrison's lips. Because, Captain, sometimes being primitive has its advantages. Commander Torres, would you like to explain Project Poseidon? Torres stepped forward, pulling up technical schematics on the holodeble. The Kryvax use quantum-based systems for everything. Weapons, shields, communications. They're incredibly advanced, incredibly efficient, and incredibly sensitive to disruption. We've modified our ship's fusion drives to create controlled plasma storms. In theory, these should play havoc with their quantum systems. In theory. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. The Kryvax are so advanced, they've forgotten about brute force solutions, Harrison explained. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and quantum attacks. But how will they handle good old-fashioned tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds? Understanding dawned on the assembled officers' faces. Sometimes, the old ways were the best ways. We've also adapted our nuclear fusion missiles, Torres continued. Instead of detonating them conventionally, we're using them to create localized electromagnetic pulses. The Kryvax ship's quantum systems should be especially vulnerable to this kind of crude but massive energy disruption. The briefing continued for hours as they went over every detail of Operation Stormbreaker. It wasn't just a military operation. It was humanity's announcement to the galaxy that they wouldn't stand by while the strong preyed on the weak. Back on the Thunderchild, Wright addressed her crew over the shipwide comm. In 20 minutes, we make our first fold space jump as a fleet. Our mission is clear: save a civilization from extinction and show the galaxy that humanity remembers what they've forgotten. That power doesn't give you the right to destroy those weaker than you. She paused, looking at the image of Earth on her personal display. They say this war is unwinnable. They say we're too primitive, too weak, too far behind. But they don't know humanity. They don't know that we've spent centuries fighting against impossible odds. They don't know that every great achievement in human history started with someone doing what everyone else said couldn't be done. The ship hummed as the fold space drive powered up. Across the fleet, 37 crews prepared for humanity's first interstellar battle. This is Captain Wright. All hands to battle stations. Commence Operation Stormbreaker. The fabric of space itself seemed to shudder as humanity's fleet vanished in 37 flashes of light, leaving Earth behind and heading toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. In the darkness of space, aboard the Lid Kryvax harvester ship, an alarm began to sound. Unknown vessels approaching. The Kryvax commander dismissed the warning with a gesture. After all, what could primitive humans possibly do against the mighty Kryvax Empire? The Battle of Azure Deep. The human fleet erupted into normal space just beyond Nixus Prime's outer moon, their fold space drives leaving rippling distortions in their wake. Captain Wright's stomach lurched as the Thunderchild's artificial gravity compensated for the transition. Through the bridge's panoramic display, she could see the massive Kryvax harvesters, dark, angular shapes against the blue sphere of Nixus Prime. Multiple contacts. Lieutenant Okonjo called out. Reading 23 harvester ships. And Christ, over 200 fighter-class vessels deploying. Launch our drones, Wright ordered. Execute Operation Poseidon. Across the human fleet, thousands of small unmanned craft shot forth from launch tubes. To Kryvax sensors, they would appear primitive and harmless. Simple machines barely worth noticing. That was exactly what humanity was counting on. The Kryvax commander's response came as a broadcast on all frequencies, automatically translated by the ship's AI. Primitive vessels, you have entered restricted space. Your technology level is insufficient for legitimate claim dispute. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. Admiral Harrison's reply was brief. We're not here to dispute your claim. We're here to stop a genocide. The first Kryvax shots came as streams of quantum-entangled particles designed to disrupt advanced shield systems. They passed straight through the human ship's crude magnetic shields with minimal effect. The Kryvax commander's confusion was almost palpable in his next transmission. Your vessels should be destabilizing. What trickery is this? Now, Wright commanded, initiate plasma storm. The human fleet's fusion drives flared simultaneously, releasing carefully controlled bursts of plasma. The electromagnetic interference created a chaotic maelstrom in space, playing havoc with the Kryvax's quantum-based systems. Their fighter screens began to waver, their formations breaking apart as their ultra-sophisticated guidance systems went haywire. Drone swarms in position, Okonjo reported. EMPs ready. Light them up. The seemingly primitive drones detonated in carefully coordinated waves, releasing electromagnetic pulses that would have been considered crude by Kryvax standards. And that was precisely why they were so effective. The quantum-entangled shields of the nearest harvester ships flickered and failed. All ships, commence attack pattern Delta. Harrison's voice came through the command channel. Remember your training. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't let them adapt. The human fleet broke formation, each ship executing maneuvers that would have seemed insane to the Kryvax tacticians. They dove through the gaps in the enemy formation, launching salvos of relativistic tungsten rods, simple kinetic weapons that required no sophisticated guidance systems to tear through unshielded hull plating. On the Thunderchild's bridge, Wright watched as the first harvester ship began to break apart. They're launching a counterattack. Evasive maneuvers. The Kryvax response was devastating. Energy beams lanced out, cutting one of the smaller human vessels in half. Fighter craft that had recovered from the initial EMP blast swarmed around the human fleet, their quantum weapons leaving trails of distorted space in their wake. "We've lost the Hyperion and the Stalwart," Okonjo reported, his voice tight. Artemis reporting heavy damage. Wright gripped her command chair as the Thunderchild shuddered under enemy fire. Status of the Nixian evacuation. Harvester ships are disengaging from their collection points. We're buying the Nixians sometime, but we're taking heavy losses. Commander Torres, Wright called to engineering. How long until we can trigger another plasma storm? Drives still cooling down. 5 minutes minimum. We don't have 5 minutes, Wright muttered, watching as another human ship succumbed to Kryvax fire. Then she saw it, a pattern in the enemy formation. All ships, this is Captain Wright. They're protecting their quantum communication nexus. They may be advanced, but they still need to coordinate their forces. Target Grid 793. The human fleet's response was immediate. Every operational ship turned their weapons on a single point in space. The Kryvax formation shifted, trying to protect what Wright had identified as their command and control center. Gotcha. Wright smiled grimly. All ships, launch remaining EMP drones on my mark. Mark. The drones shot forward just as the Kryvax ships moved to intercept. The resulting electromagnetic explosion caught most of their fleet in its radius. For a crucial moment, their quantum systems failed completely. All ships, fire everything we've got. Harrison's order rang through the command channel. Empty the tubes. What followed was the largest synchronized weapons release in human military history. Tungsten rods, missiles, and energy weapons struck the Kryvax fleet while their defenses were down. 3 harvester ships broke apart immediately. A 4th spun out of control, its quantum core breaching in a spectacular explosion that took out 2 more. The remaining Kryvax vessels began to retreat, their formations in disarray. The human fleet had suffered grievous losses, 11 ships destroyed, most others damaged. But they had achieved what the galaxy thought impossible. They had fought the mighty Kryvax Empire to a standstill. As the enemy fleet disappeared into fold space, a new transmission reached the Thunderchild. It came from the ocean below, a chorus of harmonic frequencies that the translator rendered into words. "The people of Nixus Prime thank you, humans. You have given us hope where there was none. You have shown us that the galaxy still has heroes." Wright looked at her battered bridge, her wounded but proud crew, and the blue world they had just saved. "We're not heroes," she transmitted back. "We're just people who couldn't stand by and watch." But as the adrenaline of battle faded, she knew this was only the beginning. The Kryvax Empire would return, and next time they wouldn't underestimate humanity's primitive weapons. More importantly, the galaxy was about to change. The message had been sent. Humanity would fight for what was right, no matter the odds. In the depths of Nixus Prime, the ancient songs began again, but now they sang of something new. The day humanity proved that being less advanced didn't mean being less worthy, and that sometimes the strongest weapons weren't quantum cannons or energy beams, but the simple determination to stand up for what was right. Ripples across the stars. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 1,000 worlds argued in hundreds of languages as recordings of the Battle of Azure Deep played on massive holographic displays. The quantum crystal walls of the chamber reflected their heated discussions in shifting patterns of light and shadow. High Counselor Venn of the Alfing Collective slammed his crystalline appendage against the podium. "This is unprecedented. These humans have violated every protocol, every established procedure for conflict resolution. They saved an entire civilization, countered Representative Zira of the Helios Confederation, her bioluminescent patterns flashing with intensity. While we debated procedures, they acted. While we cited regulations, they fought for justice. In the midst of this chaos, Ambassador Julian Rossi of Earth stood calmly, his simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the ornate garments of the other representatives. It was humanity's first official appearance before the Galactic Council, and he intended to make it count. "The Council recognizes Earth's ambassador," Venn announced, his tone carrying barely concealed disdain. Rossi stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. "Distinguished members of the Council, I hear much talk of protocols and procedures. But let me ask you this. Where in your ancient laws does it say that advanced civilizations have the right to destroy less developed ones? When did this council decide that technological superiority grants moral authority?" The Kryvax Empire had filed all proper documentation. Another counselor began. "Documentation." Rossi's voice cut through the chamber. "Would any of you accept documentation authorizing the destruction of your worlds, your peoples, your cultures?" He gestured to the battle recordings. "Look closely at those images. Those aren't just human ships you see fighting. Those are the principles that every civilization in this chamber claims to believe in. Justice, protection of the weak, standing against tyranny." Meanwhile, aboard the Thunderchild, now stationed in orbit around Nixus Prime, Captain Wright watched a different kind of drama unfold. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Kai Chen, had been working round the clock to process an unprecedented flood of incoming transmissions. "Another one, Captain," Chen reported, his eyes wide. "The Meridian Cluster. 3 systems being stripped of resources by corporate consortiums. They're asking for Earth's help." Wright rubbed her temples. "That's the 7th request today. The Kryvax Empire's defeat has opened the floodgates. It's not just requests for help," Commander Torres added, reviewing the data. "We're receiving technological schematics, strategic intelligence, resource pledges. Dozens of worlds want to ally with Earth." Back in the council chamber, the debate had reached a crucial point. High Counselor Venn's voice boomed through the hall. "The Kryvax Empire demands immediate sanctions against Earth. They accuse humanity of illegal military intervention and theft of authorized resources." Theft. Rossi's laugh was sharp. The oceans of Nixus Prime weren't resources to be stolen. They were the cradle of a civilization. And as for illegal military intervention, he paused, looking around the chamber. "We've reviewed the Council's charter. Nowhere does it state that member civilizations cannot aid non-member worlds under attack. You created that tradition of non-intervention because it was convenient, because it let you ignore the suffering of those you deemed less important." The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Smaller nations, worlds that had long chafed under the dominance of the major powers, began speaking up. The Kryvax Empire's representative, a towering figure in chrome armor, rose to speak. "This is your final warning." The Kryvax delegate rumbled. "Earth must withdraw its forces from Nixus Prime and pay reparations or face the consequences. We have already dispatched our main battle fleet." Rossi smiled, and those who knew humanity's history would have recognized it. The smile of someone who knew something their opponent didn't. "We expected as much. In fact, we counted on it. Ambassador Krell of the Nixians, would you like to share your news?" A hologram appeared in the chamber center, a Nixian elder, her bioluminescent patterns forming complex patterns of joy and determination. While the Kryvax Empire gathered its fleet for revenge, the humans helped us adapt their plasma storm technology to our oceans. Our entire world is now surrounded by a permanent electromagnetic barrier. The Kryvax quantum harvesters cannot function within it. We are safe, not because of superior technology, but because of human ingenuity and compassion. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They'd changed the rules of the game. They'd shown that technological superiority wasn't everything, that innovation, determination, and moral courage could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. "We're not here to fight you," Rossi continued into the silence. "We're here to remind you of who you once were. Every civilization in this chamber started with dreams of exploring the stars, of making the galaxy a better place. When did you forget that? When did you decide that power was more important than justice?" As he spoke, more holographic images appeared, transmissions from dozens of worlds, all asking for Earth's help, all offering alliance. The balance of power that had held the galaxy in check for millennia was shifting, not through force of arms, but through the power of hope. In orbit around Nixus Prime, Captain Wright received a transmission from Admiral Harrison. "The Kryvek's main fleet has just emerged from Fold space. 500 ships, Captain. Any thoughts?" Wright looked at her crew, tired, battle-worn, but determined. She thought of all those worlds watching, all those civilizations that had finally found the courage to stand up. "Tell them what Earth told every tyrant in our history, Admiral. Come and get us." A new dawn. 500 Kryvek's warships filled the space around Nixus Prime, their quantum drives humming with barely contained power. Against them stood 42 human vessels, the survivors of the original fleet joined by 5 newly arrived ships from Earth, and something the Kryvek's hadn't expected: 300 smaller ships of various designs, a hastily assembled coalition of vessels from worlds that had decided to stand with humanity. Admiral Harrison surveyed the tactical display aboard the Thunderchild's bridge, where he had transferred his flag after the battle damage to his original command ship. "Well, Captain Wright, still think we can win this?" Wright studied the sensor readings, noting the energy signatures of the Kryvek's fleet. "They're angry, sir. They'll be less cautious this time." "Good," Harrison smiled. "Anger makes you stupid." Lieutenant Chen broadcast on all frequencies. Chen nodded, and Harrison addressed not just their fleet, but the entire galaxy watching through Council transmissions. "This is Admiral Thomas Harrison of Earth. We stand here today not just for Nixus Prime, but for every world that has suffered under the pretense that might makes right. To the Kryvek's empire, you can still withdraw. This doesn't have to end in battle." The Kryvek's Supreme Commander's response was immediate, his holographic image towering in the bridge. "You primitives have deluded yourselves into thinking your lucky victory was something more than a fluke. We will crush your fleet, drain this ocean world, and then we will show Earth the price of defiance." "You still don't understand," Harrison replied calmly. "You see all these ships that came to stand with us. That's not because we're strong. It's because we remember what you've forgotten, that the strong exist to protect the weak, not to prey upon them." The Kryvek's commander's response was to open fire. The space between the fleets lit up with quantum energy weapons and exotic particle beams, but humanity and their allies were ready. "Execute Operation Daybreak," Wright commanded. The human fleet split into predetermined groups, each leading squadrons of allied ships. They had spent the last week teaching their allies their tactics, showing them how to use simple technologies in ways the Kryvek's would never expect. From the oceans of Nixus Prime, massive electromagnetic pulses burst forth, the Nixians using their entire world as a weapon. In space, hundreds of ships released clouds of metallic dust that diffused quantum targeting systems. Primitive kinetic weapons struck from unexpected angles. "They're adapting to the EMPs," Torres called out from engineering. "Their quantum shields are reconfiguring." "Good," Wright replied, "because we're not doing the same thing twice. Lieutenant Okonjo, signal the Helios contingent. Time for Phase 2. A group of ships from the Helios Confederation moved forward, their solar sails unfurling. The Kryvek's commanders likely dismissed them as primitive technology, until the sails began focusing and reflecting the star's energy in coordinated patterns, creating a deadly network of concentrated solar beams that sliced through quantum shields calibrated for more exotic attacks. The battle raged for hours. Human ships fought alongside vessels from dozens of worlds, each contributing what they could. Some had powerful weapons but poor shields. Others had amazing sensors but weak weapons. Together, they covered each other's weaknesses, creating something greater than the sum of its parts.